You've probably walked past the pallet of rice at the front of the warehouse a dozen times without really looking at it. Your cart is half full. You already know what you came for, but somewhere between the big bag and the little one, most shoppers are quietly losing money without noticing. And that's before we even get to the item near the end of this list that barely spoils it all. Several of these 10 have already jumped 30 to 100% in the last 2 years while nobody was watching the shelf test. You still have time. You just should not wait. This isn't a doomsday list. It's 10 bulk items where the price per serving math, the shelf life, and the supply story all line up in your favor right now, if you know what you're actually looking at. At Costco, the deal and the smart buy are not always the same item. Some bulk formats are quietly vulnerable to disappearing or spiking first. So which one do you grab first? The cheap calories or the thing that makes the cheap calories worth eating? Number 10, the 25-pound bag of rice. Here's the mistake. Someone grabs the small 5-pound bag just to be safe, while the 25-pound bag sits 3 feet away for barely more money. In some city markets, that little bag runs $8 to $12. The big bag can run under 30. Do the math per pound, and the small bag is costing 3 to 4 times more for the exact same rice. The guy buying the little bag every week is paying for the same rice 4 times over, and he doesn't even know it. Rice feels like a forever item, so nobody bothers comparing unit price. That's exactly why it's easy to miss. Watch the shelf for a signal though. When smaller bag sizes start creeping into the space where the big bags used to sit, that's the store quietly shifting toward a format that costs you more per pound while looking almost identical. Here's the twist. The bulk deal only stays a deal if the rice is stored right. Leave a 25-pound bag open in a warm pantry and you're not saving money, you're feeding bugs. So the real purchase isn't just the rice. It's the rice plus a sealed container or a Mylar bag on the same trip. Buy the big bag only if you're also buying something to protect it. Rice gets you fed. It does not make dinner taste like anything worth eating twice. Number 9, shelf-stable cooking oil. This is the bottle that quietly became a luxury item. In 2023, Kirkland's 2-liter olive oil ran around $17. Within about a year, some locations were charging $25 for the exact same bottle. That's a jump most people didn't clock until they were standing at the register wondering if they grabbed the wrong size. Oil doesn't run out fast at home, so people don't track its price the way they track eggs or gas. That's the blind spot. And here's the shelf signal worth watching. When a category like this spikes, the large bottles are usually the first thing to sell out, while the small bottles linger at a much higher price per ounce. The cheap version disappears before the premium version does. Always. Picture reaching for your usual pan-searing oil and finding only the small, overpriced bottle left on the shelf. That's the home consequence, not an empty shelf, just an expensive one. And the deeper twist is almost unsettling. Weather in 1 or 2 growing regions on the other side of the planet can move the price of a bottle sitting in a warehouse near you. Prices did ease back down in 2025 after a better harvest, but that's not a guarantee, that's a temporary window. The smart move is buying the large bottle when the price looks normal, not waiting for a spike to convince you it's worth it. Oil makes food cookable. But the next item is the one that makes food worth waking up for. Number 8, whole bean or ground coffee. This one isn't about survival math. It's about a morning that runs differently because the usual bag isn't on the shelf. Coffee is one of the most weather and tariff-exposed grocery categories there is, which means the price can move for reasons that have nothing to do with your store at all. In mid-2025, ground roast coffee hit a record $8.41 a pound in the US, a 33% jump in a single year. Some bulk club brands went from around $14 a bag to nearly $20 in that same stretch. The bag that used to run $14 was pushing $20 before the label even changed color. Coffee feels like a personal indulgence, not a supply item, so almost nobody thinks to stock it. Watch for familiar roast sizes shrinking or quietly getting replaced by unfamiliar value blends. That's the tell. And here's the part most people don't realize. Coffee freezes in stores far longer than people assume when it's kept whole bean and sealed. That makes it one of the easiest routine savers to buy ahead of a price swing instead of during one. Grab an extra bag on a normal trip. Freeze it whole. Don't wait for the spike to remind you. Coffee protects the morning. But mornings still need something to eat with it, and that's where most pantries quietly fall apart. Number 7. Shelf-stable fat. Butter or ghee. Fewer dairy cattle, less milk, less butter. That's not speculation, that's the pattern behind a real price story. In 2024, the USDA raised its butter forecast to about $3 a pound, up 15%, on the heels of a 2022 spike that pushed average butter prices up roughly a third. Shoppers reported Club Pack Kirkland butter jumping close to $1 or $2 within a single week at multiple locations. People track egg prices because they buy eggs weekly. Butter gets bought less often, so the jump feels sudden and almost personal when it happens. Watch the club-size multi-packs if they start getting replaced by smaller wrapped portions at a noticeably higher price per pound. That's the format thinning out before the category does. Here's the real twist though. Butter isn't shelf-stable at room temperature like oil is, so the bulk buy only works if you actually have freezer space. And butter freezes beautifully for close to a year, which means that 4-pound club pack isn't really a pantry purchase. It's a freezer purchase in disguise. Picture a pantry stacked with flour, sugar, and rice that produces absolutely nothing edible without a fat to cook or bake with. That's the gap fat fills. Buy the club pack at a normal price, freeze it in portions, and stop repurchasing small packs at a markup every few weeks. Fat makes stored food edible, but even good fat and good grain still needs something to give a meal actual flavor. Number 6. Canned or shelf-stable protein. Most people buy fresh meat every single week and walk right past the multi-pack of shelf-stable protein a few aisles over. That's the mistake. Canned meat products like Spam are commonly cited with a shelf life of 2 to 5 years. That case in the back of the pantry isn't old. It's got years left, longer than most New Year's resolutions. Canned protein has an image problem. People assume fresh is automatically better without ever weighing the cost or the convenience against it. But watch what actually happens on the shelf. Fresh meat gets marked down as it nears its date. Shelf-stable multi-packs just sit there, steady, never discounted, quietly ignored. Picture a week where fresh protein is expensive or simply not available, and the only real dinner in the house comes from a can that's been sitting there so long everyone forgot it existed. That's not an emergency scenario. That's a normal week for a lot of households. The deeper twist is that shelf-stable protein isn't just a backup plan. With the right seasoning, it becomes a regular meal, not just something you eat when there's no other option. Buy what your household will actually eat, and rotate the oldest cans into meals first, instead of letting them age forever in the back corner. Protein and fat solve dinner, but none of it matters if the meal tastes like nothing, which is exactly where most stocked pantries quietly fail. Number 5. Sugar or a shelf-stable sweetener. Nobody worries about sugar until the recipe won't set, the jam won't preserve properly, or the treat that used to be cheap suddenly isn't. That's the moment this item goes from invisible to essential. Overall U.S. food prices climbed roughly 31% between 2019 and 2025, and sweetener-dependent categories have been among the ones hit hardest. Sugar feels infinite and cheap, so it never lands on anyone's stock-up radar. That's exactly the blind spot. Watch the shelf price gap between the bulk bag and the small one. If the bulk bag is only marginally cheaper per pound than it used to be, that's a quiet sign. The bulk discount itself is shrinking. Picture a canning project or a baking batch half-finished because the bag ran out mid-recipe on the one day there's no time to run back to the store. That's the practical consequence. Small, but genuinely annoying. Here's the relief though. Sugar essentially never spoils if it's kept dry. Unlike almost everything else on this list, there's very little downside to having extra sitting in the pantry. Grab the bulk bag on a completely normal trip. There's no real risk in it. Sugar handles flavor and preservation, but preserving anything only matters if there's still water clean enough to cook or clean with. Number 4. Bottled or bulk water. This is the first item on the list that isn't food at all. And that's the point. A pantry full of rice, oil, and protein means nothing during a boil water notice with no clean water to cook any of it in. That's the scene worth picturing before you skip past this one. People assume tap water is simply a given, so bulk water purchases get treated as optional, an afterthought at the bottom of the receipt. But a case of bulk water at a club store commonly costs a small fraction of what the same volume costs in convenience store single bottles, often several times less per gallon. The case in the corner of the garage is the cheapest insurance in the whole store, and most carts roll right past it without a second thought. Watch for this shelf signal after any local weather event or water advisory. Single-bottle multi-packs suddenly get more shelf space than the large cases, because that's what everyone grabbed first in a hurry. Here's the part most people get wrong. Bottled water has a printed date, but properly sealed water is usable well past it. The real limit isn't the water itself, it's whether the container stayed intact. Keep one case rotated per person in the household instead of buying in a panic once there's already an advisory. Water keeps the whole system running, but there's one seasoning item that decides whether the food made with that water is something people actually want to eat. Number 3. Bulk cooking salt or seasoning base. Long before refrigeration existed, salt was the entire preservation system. That history matters here because the function hasn't changed. Salt is one of the only grocery items with an effectively indefinite shelf life when it's kept dry, which means a single bulk container can outlast the container it's stored in. It's cheap enough that people assume there's no reason to even think about it. That's exactly why it's easy to overlook. Here's the shelf signal though. Plain, unflavored bulk salt often gets pushed to the bottom shelf, while flashy finishing salts get the eye-level space. The boring version is the one that actually does the job. Picture a batch of preserved or cured food failing because the wrong type or amount of salt was on hand. Small ingredient, entire project ruined. That's the weak link most people never see coming until it's already too late to fix. Because salt lasts indefinitely, it's one of the only items on this whole list where buying too much is functionally impossible. Buy the plain bulk container once, store it somewhere dry, and treat it as a permanent fixture rather than a repeat purchase. Salt preserves and flavors everything else on this list. But the next item is the one almost no cart includes, and it might be the most quietly important of all. Number 2. Honey. Here's an item that essentially never spoils, and it still has a hidden reliability problem. The U.S. imports roughly 3/4 of the honey it consumes, and about 80% of those imports come from just a handful of countries. Recent testing has continued to find a portion of imported samples mixed with cheaper syrups. 3 out of every 4 jars of honey in America came from somewhere else, and the jar that never expires is also the jar most likely to not be entirely what the label says. Honey looks the same whether it's pure or blended, so there's no visible shelf signal at all. That's what makes this one different from every other item on the list. The real signal is the price. If a jar is priced unusually low compared to raw, single-origin honey, that low price is itself the warning. Picture reaching for raw honey during a cold, or for a specific recipe, and getting something closer to flavored syrup instead. That's the quiet failure most people never even notice happened. Here's the relief, and it's a genuinely useful one. Honey crystallizing over time is actually a sign of purity, not spoilage. The jar that looks the most off on your shelf may be the most trustworthy one you own. Buy the bulk jar, but favor clear single-origin labeling when it's available, and never worry when it turns cloudy or hardens. Honey is the item that lasts almost forever but hides a quiet catch. Number 1 flips that idea completely, with an item built specifically so the catch isn't a problem at all. Number 1. Freeze-dried meals or emergency food kits. This is the item most carts roll straight past, because the packaging makes it look like something for extreme situations instead of a practical grocery decision. That assumption is the whole reason it earns the top spot. Everything else on this list needs to be rotated, watched, or used before a date. Freeze-dried vegetables and meal kits sold at warehouse clubs have been shopper reported with shelf lives in the 25 to 30-year range. Still good in 30 years. Read that back. That's not months, that's not even years in the normal sense. That's a time frame most people won't live through twice. These buckets rarely go on sale and rarely sell out, which tells you exactly how many shoppers are walking straight past them without a second look. And here's the twist that ties the whole list together. This single item combines what every other item on this list solves separately: calories, fat, protein, flavor, and shelf stability, into one purchase. Picture a pantry stacked with rice, oil, canned protein, and honey that still can't produce a fast, complete meal on the 1 week nobody has the energy to cook. One bucket solves that instantly. It quietly removes the pressure of worrying whether half the other items on this list are running low at the same time. Buy one case as a genuine long-term anchor, not a panic purchase. This is the one item on the entire list where buying too early simply isn't a real risk. Every item on this list solves one problem. This is the one that solves several at once, and that's exactly why it's number one. Here's how it all connects. Calories need fat. Fat needs flavor. Flavor needs preservation. All of it needs water to actually become a meal. And the whole system only holds together long-term if at least one part of it doesn't require constant rotation, checking, or worrying, which is exactly the gap that last item fills. On your next trip, don't treat this as one big project. Pick one item from the first half of this list, calories, fat, or protein, and one from the second half, water, salt, or honey, and put both in the same cart instead of saving them for separate errands. Shelves don't have to be empty for a shortage to start. The useful version of something can quietly become unreliable long before the category itself looks empty. The best time to buy boring, affordable staples is while they're still boring and still affordable. So which one of these 10 have you already noticed getting more expensive or harder to find at your own store?